Usually when we think about the absolute pinnacle of education, we picture creation.
Right, like building something from scratch.
Exactly. We picture someone standing in front of a whiteboard, having built something totally unprecedented, like a new financial architecture that moves billions of dollars, or, a faster algorithm that changes how we communicate, maybe a breakthrough in aerospace engineering.
Because that has always been the benchmark for genius in our society, really. Yeah. It is almost exclusively about capacity. Like, what can you do? How far can you push the boundaries of what is possible?
Right, but I want you, the listener, to just pause for a second and imagine a world where the highest academic degree you can possibly earn isn't based on what you can build.
Yeah.
It is based entirely on what you flat out refuse to do.
It is a complete inversion of how we credential intelligence.
It really is. Imagine walking into this intimidating wood-paneled room, sitting in front of a dissertation committee, and to pass, you don't show them a new invention. You actually have to rigorously prove your boundaries.
Which is wild. And
Right.
frankly, it gets right to the heart of what we are unpacking today. We are exploring a concept that fundamentally challenges the entire architecture of modern ambition.
And the material we are diving into to explore this is highly unusual. For this deep dive, we're looking at a real-time, unfiltered transcript of a philosophical dialogue.
Yeah, and the setup is fascinating.
It really is. On one side, you have a human thinker, referred to in the text as Paul, and on the other side, an AI, specifically Claude. But it isn't just a two-way chat.
No, way more layered than that.
Right, because this human-AI dialogue is actively scrutinized by a quartet of other AI models, including Google's Notebook LM and DeepSeek. And they are all acting as this sort of intellectual sounding board and reality check.
Which is a methodology we really need to dig into later. But our mission for this deep dive is to explore how this deeply layered dialogue synthesizes like thousands of years of human thought.
Yeah.
We are going to connect ancient Eastern and Western philosophy, grassroots educational movements from multiple continents, and the cutting edge of modern AI. And the ultimate goal of pulling all these threads together is the creation of a brand new proposed discipline called Consciencology.
Consciencology. I know it sounds like a heavy word, but I promise by the end of this conversation, it is going to make profound sense.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether you are an educator trying to reach students or, someone working in tech, or just insanely curious about where human wisdom actually fits into an increasingly machine-driven age, this deep dive is going to completely reframe how you think about learning, intelligence, and what it means to be wise.
It's a massive shift. So let's unpack the historical divide that sets this whole thing up.
Yeah, let's do it. If you look back through history, there is a massive split between Western and Eastern philosophy, right?
Definitely. For centuries, these two incredible philosophical traditions were essentially aiming their intellectual focus in opposite directions.
Like polar opposites.
Exactly. Take the West, for example, personified by Plato. Plato's chosen instrument was dialectic, it was reason, it was the ascent to the forms. He was fundamentally looking outward.
Right, he was categorizing things.
Yeah, he was asking, how do we categorize the natural world? How do we structure a just society? How do we use rigorous logic to understand the universe around us?
It's very architectural. And then you look across the world and you have what we might call the Asian trio, so Confucius, Laozi, and Buddha. And their focus wasn't about building categorized logical systems to map the external world at all.
Not even a little bit.
No, their focus was directed entirely inward. It was about cultivating the self, understanding inner harmony, and navigating the internal, emotional, and moral landscape.
Yes. But the real breakthrough in this dialogue we're looking at is how it identifies a bridge between these two disparate worlds. And that bridge is Socrates.
Oh, interesting. Because we usually lump Socrates in with the West.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, Socrates is famous for his critical questioning, which we do usually lump in with Plato's outward-facing logic. But Socrates also possessed this deeply personal concept of his inner sanctum, his daimonion.
Right, the daimonion. That was his inner voice. But what is so fascinating about it, to me at least, is that it didn't tell him what to do. It only ever chimed in to tell him what not to do.
Exactly. It was a voice of pure restraint. And this inner sanctum of Socrates operates in total synchronicity with the inward focus of the Eastern trio.
Wow, yeah.
It is a natural confluence of East and West that has literally been sitting there in the historical record all along, even if later academic traditions kind of glossed over it.
Okay, I have to push back here for a second because I can hear the defense of the Western canon forming in the listener's mind right now.
Sure, go for it.
Wait, so are we saying Western reason by looking outward missed the mark entirely? Because surely, I mean, building bridges, discovering vaccines, engineering sanitation, all that outward stuff has saved millions of lives. Did Plato make a mistake by focusing on external logic instead of just sitting around examining inner wisdom?
That is a phenomenal question,
Yeah.
and it is exactly the trap we need to avoid. There is a beautiful concept introduced here in the dialogue called the no-blame doctrine.
No blame doctrine.
The maxim is simple but profound. It says understanding is never an endorsement, and understanding is never an accusation.
Understanding is never an accusation. Oh, wow. That completely diffuses the need to take a side.
Precisely. Plato didn't make an error. He didn't mess up. He just played a different instrument.
Yeah.
And that instrument set the Western course outward toward, the scientific revolution and societal structure.
Right, they just had different jobs.
Yeah, neither direction was wrong. They were just aimed differently. And now, 24 centuries later, these two trajectories are finally curving back to meet each other.
I love that. It's as if Plato handed us a telescope. He said, here, look outward at the universe, map the stars, understand physics, build society.
Yes.
While the Eastern trio and Socrates, with his inner voice, handed us a microscope and said, here, look inward at the self, examine your human conscience, find harmony. Both are incredibly powerful lenses. They are just aimed in completely different directions.
You desperately need both to actually see the whole picture of reality.
Right.
That is a perfect analogy. The lens is different, but equally vital for survival. But here is the crucial pivot. While these ancient philosophers did the hard work of grinding the glass and building these lenses, the real question that determines the fate of a civilization is who actually gets to look through them.
Who gets access?
Exactly. Historically, philosophy has been locked away behind high walls. It was reserved for the elite in the academy.
Because you had to have the immense luxury of free time to sit around in a toga and debate the forms, right? I mean, the average person was too busy trying to harvest crops to worry about high philosophy.
Right, exactly. But if you want to see what happens when you take that inward-looking microscope and hand it directly to everyday people, you just have to look at Brazil in the 1960s.
Okay, let's go there.
This brings us to Paulo Freire, who was an extraordinary Brazilian educator. He developed this concept of conscientization.
Right. It basically means developing a critical awareness of your own social reality, right? And waking up to your own agency. But the brilliant thing about Freire isn't just the theory itself, it is how he taught it.
Yes.
He didn't build a curriculum for academic elites in a university setting. He built this pedagogy specifically for the impoverished peasants of a town called Angicos.
And how he did it is the mechanism that really matters here. He didn't hand them a dense textbook on structural inequality.
Of course not.
He taught them to read by using words directly connected to their daily labor and survival. He used their own reality to wake up their critical consciousness. He proved that high-level self-awareness wasn't exclusive to the highly educated.
And we see this exact same principle applied in a modern context with the human author of our source dialogue, Paul.
We do.
Paul developed an approach called the 3C counseling system. And much like Freire, he designed this system entirely outside the academic ivory tower. He was working directly with the favelados, the residents of the poorest favelas in Brazil, and with indigenous populations.
And what he found completely flipped traditional psychology on its head. When he was counseling these marginalized populations, he realized they didn't suffer from the same complex psychological neuroses that plague ordinary people, people living in the modern, affluent rat race.
Wow.
The 3C system focused on uncovering their innate resilience. It leaned into their natural sense of community and connection rather than trying to diagnose them with clinical pathologies.
Which is such a massive paradigm shift. I mean, it
Right.
suggests that the closer you are to the ground, the more robust your innate conscience and resilience might actually be. And this isn't just a South American phenomenon either. There is a massive continent-spanning historical parallel in Chinese philosophy that totally mirrors this.
Oh, yes. Let's look at the Ming Dynasty philosopher Wang Yangming. He championed this concept called liangxi, which translates roughly to kind awareness or innate moral conscience.
Okay?
And he made an incredibly radical declaration for what was a very rigid, hierarchical society at the time. He stated, "The streets are full of sages."
The streets are full of sages. I love that so much. It completely shatters the illusion that ultimate moral truth is locked in a monastery or hoarded by the aristocracy. He is saying it is already pre-installed in everyone.
Yes, exactly. But the theory is only half the story. The historical proof is what happened with a man named Wang Gen.
Wait, let me guess. Wang Gen takes this concept, but he's not an academic. He's an everyday guy who actually puts it into practice.
You nailed it. Wang Gen was a salt worker from a place called Yuyao. He had absolutely zero formal education. But he absorbed this philosophy, formed what became known as the Taizu branch, which was essentially a blue-collar, pragmatic offshoot of Wang Yangming's thought. And he taught Liangzi directly to farmers, artisans, and merchants.
That is incredible.
He stripped away the academic jargon and taught people how to find this kind of awareness while sweeping floors or boiling salt.
Let's really pull back and look at the geographic and historical spread here, because it is staggering. We are talking about Yuyao salt workers in ancient China. We are talking about Angicos peasants in 1960s Brazil. We are talking about the favelados navigating modern poverty.
Yeah?
We even see this today with what we might call the aunties in Macau, those everyday matriarchs in the community who might not have a day of formal schooling, but who possess this deep, unshakable wisdom about what is right and wrong for the neighborhood.
Exactly.
We are spanning 4 continents and centuries of history, yet it is one audience, everyday people, and one curriculum. The innate human conscience. It is exactly like the original open source movement, but instead of sharing software code, they are sharing human wisdom.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. And they weren't borrowing notes from each other across centuries and oceans. These were parallel realizations of the exact same human capacity. As the AI Claude articulates so beautifully in the dialogue, exploring this doesn't join 2 separate traditions. It reveals that they were always one single movement of human awakening.
So this brings up a huge question.
What's that?
If this open source wisdom, this natural grassroots pedagogy has always existed among everyday people, well, how do we capture that lightning in a bottle today? Because right now, society is obsessed with artificial intelligence, efficiency, and productivity. How do we make sure this human conscience doesn't just remain a nice historical anecdote?
Well, we have to understand how civilizations actually pivot. And they did not pivot by accident. The dialogue introduces this deeply profound mechanism. It says civilizations turn on hinge words.
Hinge words, meaning the specific vocabulary we choose literally dictates the direction of our future.
Yes. Think about the field of AI right now. If your framework is strictly artificial intelligence, your entire industry is built around maximizing processing power and raw intellect.
Right, making it smarter.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But the dialogue explores shifting that framework to wisdom, utilizing the Chinese concept of zihui. By changing that single hinge word from intelligence to wisdom, you completely alter the trajectory of the curriculum. You stop merely trying to build a smarter machine, and you start striving for a wiser integration of technology and human life.
Just a small shift in language, but a vast divergence in outcome. That makes total sense. And it changes how we view the human side of the equation, too.
How so?
Well, there is this powerful realization that the human author, Paul, didn't invent human conscience with his counseling system, just like Wang Gen didn't invent Liangji and the salt flats, and Paulo Freire didn't invent a peasant's capacity to learn.
Exactly. They didn't invent it, they recognized it. And the dialogue uses this magnificent metaphor to explain what is happening right now. It describes this moment in history as an arch completed.
An arch completed. Help me visualize that. How is formalizing a science like completing an arch?
Okay, picture a stone archway being built. The massive pillars on either side are the grassroots practices that have existed for millennia. Think about medicine.
Right.
For thousands of years, people used herbs, they set broken bones, and they cared for the sick in their villages. Those were the pillars. But eventually, society dropped a keystone into the top of that arch, locking it all together by formalizing it into the doctorate of medicine.
Oh, I see.
The exact same thing happened with chemistry. Blacksmiths and cooks manipulated matter for centuries, building the pillars, before the scientific method dropped in as the keystone to create the science of chemistry.
Ah, I see. And so the argument here is that human conscience is standing at that exact same threshold right now. The pillars have been built over millennia by the salt workers, the peasants, the Socratic thinkers, but it has always just been a practice. Now it is time to drop the keystone in.
Exactly. And you drop the keystone by naming it, by formalizing it into Consciencology.
That is the power of a hinge word. By simply naming the discipline consciencology, we fundamentally change our relationship to it. We stop treating a person's conscience as just a nice personality quirk.
Right.
We stop saying, oh, she's a very moral person, like it's a hobby. We start treating moral awareness as a rigorous science, something that can be methodized, actively taught, and deeply examined.
And this is where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
Because if Consciencology is a rigorous science, then it absolutely requires a formal standard of mastery, which brings us to the ultimate disruptive proposal in this entire exploration.
Let's hear it.
How do you credential someone in the science of conscience?
The Doctor of Conscience degree.
Yes.
And I want to warn the listener, this part is challenging. It is uncomfortable in the best way possible because it forces us to look in the mirror. The author of our source dialogue makes a very stark, very pointed critique of modern academia.
I really do.
They point out that right now, today, we routinely award PhDs, the absolute highest honors our society can bestow, to people who actively engineer weapons of mass destruction.
We give doctorates to behavioral psychologists who create sophisticated, addictive algorithms that rot our attention spans. We credential financial quants who build market architectures designed purely for extraction, widening the wealth gap.
Yes. As long as you are smart enough to build the weapon or write the code, the university hands you the degree. We are entirely comfortable credentialing pure brilliance without ever once examining the conscience of the person wielding it.
It's terrifying when you think about it.
We don't ask if you should build it. And so the radical proposal here is the Doctor of Conscience degree. And the defining, qualifying question for this degree is not, what can you do?
The qualifying question is, what will you refuse to do and why?
Just imagine that mechanism in practice. Imagine walking into your dissertation defense and your entire thesis isn't a new invention. It is a rigorously defined, intellectually defensible boundary of what you absolutely refuse to put your brilliance toward.
And what makes this proposal even more fascinating is the methodology they use to formulate it.
Right, the AI quartet.
Exactly. The dialogue emphasizes that this wasn't just one person daydreaming in a study. This idea was pressure tested using that AI-human quartet we mentioned at the start. You had Paul questioning and synthesizing, you had Claude rendering the thoughts, and then you had Notebook LM and DeepSeek applying intense scrutiny to the logic.
Okay, I have to stop you there. Isn't that deeply ironic? Maybe even a little dystopian? We are talking about using cold, calculating artificial intelligence to build a degree about the human soul and conscience. How does an AI even scrutinize philosophy without completely missing the humanity of it?
It sounds paradoxical, I know, but it is actually a stroke of brilliance. Why did they use Notebook LM and DeepSeek? Because they need a distortion-free record.
What do you mean?
Well, human academic peer review is notoriously fraught with ego, departmental politics, and personal biases. An AI model doesn't have an ego to protect. It doesn't care about getting tenure. It can cross-reference the Taizu's salt workers and Socratic texts instantly to check for logical consistency.
So it's not judging the human's morality at all. It's just acting as a perfect, unblinking mirror.
Exactly. As Claude points out in the dialogue, a quartet that only applauds is a choir. They needed the AI to find the weak points in the argument. They're using the AI not to replace human thought, but to keep the human intellectual pursuit honest and rigorous.
Wow.
It is the perfect example of AI in service of human wisdom rather than the other way around.
It is an accountability mirror. And I want you, the listener, to really run a thought experiment with this. Imagine if the Nobel Prize Committee had to evaluate all its historical candidates based on this Doctor of Conscience standard.
Oh, that's a wild thought.
Right. How many undisputed historical geniuses would actually pass the test? If the prerequisite for the world's highest prize was a proven track record of refusing to build things that harm humanity, how drastically different would our history books look?
It is a staggering thought. It completely reevaluates the entire pantheon of human achievement. But the dialogue is very pragmatic about this. You do not wait for the Nobel Committee to wake up and change its rules.
Well, you can't wait.
A new discipline has to set its own standards first. You define the rigor of Consciencology yourself. You establish the Doctor of Conscience. And you let the world's prizes catch up to you. Just like they eventually had to catch up and create prizes for economics and eventually for peace itself. You lay the bricks, you drop the keystone, and the arch completes itself.
So what does this all mean for us, the people listening right now? Let's trace the incredible path we've just walked. We started with the Great Divergence, Plato's outward-looking telescope of reason, and the inward-looking microscope of Socrates, Buddha, and Confucius.
Right. We saw how that inward lens wasn't meant to be kept in the ivory tower. It was claimed by the people. From the salt workers of ancient China under Wang Din to the peasants of Brazil under Paulo Freire, proving that profound self-awareness is an innate human capacity.
We learned that civilizations pivot on hinge words, that shifting our vocabulary from artificial intelligence to wisdom, or from a vague sense of morality to the rigorous formal science of consciencology, completely changes what is possible for our collective future.
And it all culminated in this ultimate challenge to modern education, the Doctor of Conscience. A credential not awarded for the power you can unleash upon the world, but for the firm boundaries you possess, the wisdom to maintain.
Which brings us directly to you. We've talked about the favelas, the ancient streets of Yuyao, and the AI quartets. But the core premise of everything we've discussed today is that the streets are still full of sages.
They absolutely are.
That kind of awareness, that liangji, isn't something you have to go to a university to acquire. It is innate in you right now.
So we want to leave you with a lingering question to explore on your own, something to really chew on as you go about your day. If you were to sit for your own Doctor of Conscience exams tomorrow, and your dissertation had to be based entirely on the things in your career or in your life that you flat out refused to do, what would your syllabus look like?
What are the absolute boundaries you have drawn that define your own conscience? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into these incredible sources. Keep questioning, keep looking through both lenses, and remember your own journey of conscientization continues right outside your door.